Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepless Scientist, a quiet place in the cosmos where your thoughts can unwind, and knowledge becomes a soft lullaby for the night. Tonight's journey will take us into a question that hums gently between science and imagination. What would happen if parallel worlds ever touched? Before you settle in and get cozy, perhaps take a moment to like this video and subscribe. Only if you truly find these quiet explorations enjoyable. And when you're ready, leave a comment to let me know where in the world you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. It's always a joy to see the small constellation of places we gather from, each of us drifting through our own slice of time. Now, feel free to dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for a soft background hum. Let the day dissolve a little, because what we're about to explore is both vast and strangely intimate. A thought that stretches from the smallest spark of physics to the farthest reach of imagination. If your mind begins to wander, that's perfectly fine. Let it drift. We'll still be here, quietly unfolding the story. Imagine this. Somewhere, beyond every galaxy we can see, space itself is still expanding, stretching, folding and rippling in silence. Some physicists describe it as a foam of universes, each bubble born from a moment of energy too intense to last. Inside each, a different set of rules might shape reality. A slightly heavier electron, a slower light, or a universe where gravity whispers instead of roars. Our world, the one you and I live in, may be only one bubble in that endless sea. And if that's true, the thought that follows is both thrilling and terrifying. Because if other bubbles exist, what if one day, somehow, two of them brushed against each other? What would that feel like? Not to the stars above us, but to you, right here, listening in the dark. And so begins our journey, through ripples of infinity, through collisions that could rewrite existence, through the fragile and beautiful question of what it means for reality to meet itself. Picture the universe not as empty space, but as something alive, an invisible ocean of fabric so vast it defies comprehension. Scientists sometimes call it the cosmic field, but tonight, let's imagine it as silk, soft, weightless, stretching endlessly in every direction. Every star, every planet, every heartbeat rest upon it like dust upon a drum, vibrating faintly with the rhythm of time. Now, every vibration on that drum sends ripples outward, and in the deepest corners of the cosmos, where distances are so immense that light itself grows weary, there may be other ripples, moving through other fabrics, belonging to other worlds. We rarely think of space this way, but the universe, on its grandest scale, behaves more like weather than architecture. It flows, it fluctuates, it breathes. This idea that our universe might not be alone began not from fantasy but from mathematics. Physicists studying how the Big Bang began realized that space could expand forever, endlessly creating new pockets of reality. In those models, the energy that once gave birth to our universe doesn't fade completely. Instead, it continues elsewhere, bubbling, inflating, spawning new regions, each isolated by distance, each a universe in its own right. To most of us, the word universe means everything that exists. But here, in this quiet thought experiment, universe is just one of many, a small pond in an infinite archipelago of creation. We call this grander picture the multiverse, not as science fiction, but as a sober possibility emerging from the equations that describe cosmic inflation. Of course, equations are cold things, so let's warm them up. Imagine you're blowing soap bubbles on a still summer afternoon. Each bubble floats, glistening with its own colours. Each carries its own reflection of the world. For a moment they drift apart, and then one bubble grazes another. A trembling line forms where they touch, a shimmering boundary, thin as breath, and in that moment the two worlds meet. That's how some scientists imagine parallel universes, as bubbles of reality suspended in a larger sea of existence. If they're far apart, they never know of each other. But if they drift too close, their boundaries might ripple, deform, and perhaps merge. To understand what this means, we don't need to speak of equations or particles. We only need to remember that everything, even space itself, can carry waves. The faint static of the cosmic background light, the hum of atoms, even the soft pull of gravity are all waves upon a deeper ocean. And if another ocean brushed against ours, those waves would not go unnoticed. Perhaps they already haven't. Astronomers have searched the cosmic background, the leftover glow from the Big Bang, for subtle patterns, faint circles or asymmetries that might hint at another universe having touched ours long ago. Nothing certain has been found, but the search continues, because even a small irregularity could change everything we know about our origins. It's easy to think of parallel worlds as separate stories, one where you're here, another where you never existed. But the reality, if such a thing exists, would be less like branching timelines and more like overlapping notes in a cosmic chord. Different, yet harmonizing. Distant, yet connected through the same hidden melody of physics. And as you imagine that, countless worlds drifting quietly through eternity, their edges trembling with invisible contact, something gentle happens in the mind. The universe stops feeling like an object and starts feeling like a song. Each world a verse, each collision a harmony, each listener, you, part of the same unfolding refrain. If you listen closely enough, maybe you can almost hear it, that faint vibration at the edge of silence, that subtle whisper between worlds. It's not loud or dramatic, it doesn't tear the sky apart. It's quieter than a thought, softer than a sigh, and yet it might be the very sound of existence expanding, one bubble of reality at a time. Somewhere out there, beyond the stars we know, a ripple continues, and if, in the stillness of night, you feel the air shift, ever so slightly, it might just be the universe remembering that it is never truly alone. If the universe truly ripples like a great ocean, then perhaps each wave carries a different story. The idea of other worlds is not just about distance, it's about possibility. It asks whether reality itself might come in many versions, all gently coexisting, never meeting, or perhaps one day, meeting in a way that changes everything. Physicists, in their quiet way, have given form to this idea. They've imagined 3 great visions of parallel worlds, each one born not from fiction, but from the strange, consistent logic of how the cosmos behaves. Tonight, we can wander through them slowly, without hurry or equations, letting each image settle like a dream that feels both foreign and familiar. The first vision begins with the story of the early universe, the moment after everything began. Long ago, scientists realized that the young cosmos didn't simply expand, it inflated, an expansion so fast and so complete that it stretched space itself beyond imagination. But the force that drove this inflation, this restless energy, didn't fade everywhere at once. In some distant places it kept going, like a field of grass where certain patches keep growing while others have already bloomed. In those still inflating regions, tiny fluctuations could give birth to new universes, each sealed off by their own expanding space. To us, they would look like bubbles, each containing its own version of physics. One might have heavier atoms, another slightly weaker gravity. One might never form stars at all, glowing only with ghostly energy. These are the bubble universes of eternal inflation, a vast foam of creation where each bubble is a separate reality. No formula is needed to picture this. Just imagine an endless sea of soap bubbles, each glistening with its own reflection. Some merge briefly before drifting apart again. Others float away into darkness, never to be seen. The space between them isn't nothing. It's the restless ocean of energy that keeps giving birth to new worlds, each sealed away, unaware of its siblings. But this is only one face of the multiverse. The second comes from a completely different direction, not from the beginning of time, but from the idea that our entire universe might be a surface floating in a higher dimension. Some physicists call these surfaces brains, short for membranes. It's an image both strange and beautiful. Imagine two immense invisible sheets of silk gliding through a four-dimensional space. Each sheet is a universe, complete with stars, matter and time flowing upon it. We live on one of these sheets, never seeing the other. Yet in this higher dimensional sea, motion is inevitable. Over the span of eternity, these vast membranes might drift closer, like two pages in a book drawn together by gravity we cannot perceive. And when they touch, when they collide, the energy released could ignite an entirely new universe. This is the brain collision model, sometimes called the ekpyrotic view of creation, a word that once meant born of fire. It's a poetic image, our own Big Bang, not as a singular miracle, but as the moment when two cosmic pages kissed and caught fire, and perhaps far away, other pages are still drifting, preparing for their own encounters. If universes can collide this way, then the story of creation may be ongoing, a quiet rhythm of contact and renewal woven into the structure of existence itself. The third face of the multiverse is smaller, quieter, and yet far more personal. It lives not in the vastness of space, but in the subtle dance of quantum mechanics, the physics of the very small. In the quantum world, nothing is fixed until it's observed. A particle can exist in two states at once, here and there spinning one way and another, like a coin forever caught in the act of flipping. When it is finally observed, the coin seems to choose. But some physicists, notably Hugh Everett, wondered if perhaps the coin doesn't choose at all. If instead, every possible outcome simply happens, each in its own branch of reality. You see yourself pick up one card, but in another branch, another version of you picked the other card. In this vision, the universe doesn't just expand, it continually divides, branching into countless versions of itself, each containing a different arrangement of possibilities. This is the quantum multiverse, where every moment is the beginning of infinite others. To feel this idea rather than study it, imagine standing at a crossroads under a quiet rain. Each drop that falls could take a slightly different path, landing on your shoulder, or beside your feet, or vanishing into the mist. You experience one version, but somewhere, in some other layer of existence, every drop found every path. The multiverse, then, is not just a place, it's a process. It's the act of existence exploring every possible way to be. 3 visions, 3 faces of infinity. One born from cosmic expansion, one from the hidden geometry of higher dimensions, and one from the quantum shimmer inside every atom. Different in language, but unified by the same quiet whisper. Reality is bigger than it seems. You might wonder, are these 3 stories truly separate? Or are they fragments of the same deeper truth, glimpsed from different angles of our limited understanding? Perhaps eternal inflation is the landscape, brain collisions the events within it, and quantum branching the texture that weaves through them all. It's as if the universe is telling the same story in 3 dialects, one grand and cosmic, one geometric and elegant, and one intimate and invisible. And yet, for all their complexity, these ideas share a single, simple beauty. They remind us that existence might not be a single line, but a field of light, each point glowing with its own possibility, each world suspended in a silence that hums with creation. When you look at the night sky, every star you see could be a reflection of a deeper process, an echo of countless universes forming, colliding, fading, and beginning again. And somewhere beyond all that, the ripples of their meeting travel still, like waves overlapping on the shore of an endless sea. If we listen quietly enough, Perhaps the silence between those waves is not empty at all. Perhaps it carries the faintest murmur of another world breathing beside ours, a sound so delicate that it can only be heard in stillness. And in that stillness you may feel it, the strange comfort of knowing that the universe, in all its infinite variety, is still one great song, each verse unique, yet all of them sung to the same unbroken rhythm of being. If countless worlds exist beyond our own, then somewhere out there, their edges must leave traces, faint impressions like footsteps on cosmic sand. The challenge is that these ripples are quieter than anything we've ever tried to hear. Imagine trying to sense the vibration of a single raindrop on the surface of the ocean when storms rage all around you. Yet still, we try, because if another universe once brushed ours, it may have left a mark, not in mythology, but in light itself. The light in question is ancient, older than every galaxy, older than any star. It is the afterglow of creation, the faint warmth left behind from the moment the universe first became transparent. Scientists call it the cosmic background light, a sea of radiation that fills all of space. It isn't visible to the eye, but sensitive instruments can detect it, bathing the cosmos in a soft microwave glow. If you ever remember the snowy static on an old television, about 1% of that flicker was this light, the echo of the Big Bang. Now imagine that long ago, before galaxies even formed, another universe drifted close to ours. Their borders, still soft and hot, may have rippled as they brushed, a cosmic shiver spreading through the plasma of newborn space. Those ripples could have cooled into gentle circles or asymmetries within the background light. To us, they would appear as subtle distortions in the temperature or polarization of that ancient glow. Tiny, yes, but perhaps still there, waiting to be found. Physicists have built maps of this faint radiation, drawing the earliest picture of our universe. The European Planck satellite, and before it WMAP, scanned the sky for years, searching for circular patterns, delicate bruises that might betray a long-forgotten collision. The results so far are quiet, nothing conclusive, but the fact that we can even look, that we have the tools to test such a vast poetic idea, feels like an achievement in itself. Let's soften the science into something we can feel. Picture the universe as a vast pond frozen in time. The background light is the thin layer of ice that formed on its surface when the cosmos finally cooled enough for light to travel freely. Every ripple from that early moment, every tremor of matter and energy is frozen into that sheet. When we study the map of the cosmic background, we are reading the frozen ripples of creation. Now, imagine that beneath the ice something stirred, another ripple from somewhere beyond. It would distort the pattern ever so slightly, maybe changing the way the light bends or the colour of its faint glow. That's what astronomers are searching for. Not new galaxies, not alien signals, but the texture of the impossible, woven quietly into the fabric of the sky. But why would another universe's ripple even reach us? After all, each bubble of reality is supposed to be sealed away by its own expansion, its own space. Yet, in the earliest moments when the universe was still young and hot, boundaries may have been thinner. Picture two bubbles forming in the same breath. For a heartbeat, their edges touch, and energy flows between them. That brief exchange might leave a scar that stretches across eternity. There's another way such a whisper might reach us, not through light, but through the tremble of space-time itself. You may have heard of gravitational waves, the faint shivers in the fabric of reality that occur when massive objects like black holes collide. Those waves move through everything, through stars, through dust, through you. They're not sound, but they behave like it, a universal bass note, humming softly beneath all that exists. If entire universes can collide, the resulting waves would be unimaginable. Not the short bursts we detect from black holes, but deep cosmic tones that stretch across billions of years. These waves would be too vast to hear with our current detectors. Instead, scientists listen indirectly, by studying the timing of distant pulsars, those spinning stellar beacons that flash like perfect clocks. If their rhythm drifts ever so slightly, it could be the sign of a wave passing through all of us, the faint echo of something enormous. To make this idea gentler, imagine a spider's web stretched across the stars. Every thread is tuned, every vibration meaningful. When one part trembles, the motion travels through the whole web, no matter how far. The universe is like that web, though its threads are made of space-time itself. If something immense, say, another world, brushed one edge, the entire structure would sing, and we, tiny as we are, might feel its hum through time itself. Yet, perhaps the most haunting thought is this. What if we already live inside one of those ripples? What if the universe we know, its balance, its structure, its very laws, is the outcome of a long-ago collision that left reality tilted just enough to form galaxies, stars, and eventually us? The thought is dizzying but strangely comforting, because if that's true, then we are not accidents. We are artifacts of resonance, the living echo of two worlds touching once, long before memory began. Every heartbeat, every photon of sunlight, every breath of air would be a continuation of that ancient vibration. It's possible, of course, that no such evidence will ever be found. The ripples may be too faint or too subtle or forever lost to the expansion of space. But the act of searching is itself profound. It means we've reached a point where humanity can lift its gaze and wonder, not just about our stars, but about the unseen architecture beyond them. When you think about it, even asking the question changes us. It bends the boundary of what we call reality, just enough to let imagination slip through. Whether or not we ever detect those faint circles on the sky, we have already heard something, a quiet call to curiosity humming in the dark. And maybe that's the true ripple we were meant to find, not a mark left upon the universe, but a vibration awakened within us. The awareness that existence is wider than we thought, that the silence above is not empty, but listening back. Imagine two bubbles floating through still air, each fragile, shimmering with its own colours. For a while they drift in peace, the thin film that separates them glinting like small worlds of their own. And then, almost without sound, their edges meet. For an instant the line between them trembles, a tiny boundary where surface and surface overlap. Sometimes they merge into one, other times both collapse, leaving behind nothing but a trace of mist. Now take that small moment, that soft trembling between two spheres of air, and stretch it to a cosmic scale. Replace air with space-time itself, replace thin soap film with the fabric of existence, and you begin to imagine what might happen if two universes, two entire realms of physics, ever brushed against each other. Scientists have a name for this kind of meeting. They call it a bubble collision, though what that means is far more delicate than the words suggest. In the model of eternal inflation, the cosmos is like an infinite field of energy, constantly spawning new bubbles of reality. Each one cools, stabilizes, and becomes its own universe, complete with its own laws, its own space, and its own time. These bubbles expand at unimaginable speed, pushing their boundaries outward almost as fast as light can travel. Usually these universes drift apart so quickly that they never meet again, but sometimes the expansion slows just enough, or the geometry of space folds just right, and two bubbles can come close enough for their edges to touch. It's not a collision like two asteroids crashing together. It's more like two regions of existence blending, each carrying its own blueprint for what reality should be. At that boundary, strange things would happen. The energy where the two bubbles meet could be immense, far greater than anything we can produce in a laboratory. The rules that govern our atoms, our forces, even the passage of time might falter. The very constants that define matter could shift ever so slightly. Gravity might strengthen or weaken. Light could bend differently. The fabric of space-time would ripple, radiating waves of energy that spread across each universe. But let's step back from that abstract image and soften it with something you can picture. Imagine standing in a fog so thick that you can't see beyond your own hand. Somewhere in that fog, another light is shining. Not brighter, not closer, just different. As the fog moves, the two hazes begin to overlap, their colours blending into a strange new hue that neither possessed before. That is what the meeting of universes might feel like. Not an explosion, but a blending, a quiet transformation at the edge of perception. Of course, the reality behind the metaphor is fierce. When physicists model these events, they find that the energy along the boundary could release heat far beyond what our stars can contain. Entire regions might be vaporized or restructured, and yet, from that chaos, new order could emerge, much like the first moments after our own Big Bang. In some theories, this is exactly how our universe began. Not from nothing, but from the meeting of two regions of existence whose contact unleashed everything that followed. Space, time, and matter, all born from the friction of two realities brushing past one another. It's humbling to think that we might be the afterglow of such an event. Every galaxy, every atom in your body could be the cooled ashes of a cosmic touch billions of years ago. Even the microwave light that fills the sky, that soft, ancient radiation, might carry the faint fingerprint of that contact. A memory written not in stone or history but in temperature and light. We can only speculate about what such a collision would look like from the inside. Would it begin with a shimmer in the sky, a slow distortion spreading across space? Or would it happen too fast to see, a wave of transformation sweeping through everything before a single thought could form? Some scientists suggest that the universe's shape itself could bear witness. If another bubble had ever touched ours, it might leave behind a subtle asymmetry, a region where the expansion of space is slightly uneven, or where the background light bends in a peculiar way. These clues would be faint, like scars healed long ago, but they could still whisper the story of our cosmic birth. And yet, there's a deeper, quieter thought behind all this science. It's the realization that even in the largest scale imaginable, contact, the meeting of one thing with another, is what gives rise to change. Stars ignite when clouds of gas collapse together. Elements are forged when atoms collide in their cores. Life itself begins when separate molecules find a way to bond. Every transformation in nature, from the smallest heartbeat to the largest galaxy, happens when two paths cross. So if two universes could meet, perhaps that too would be a kind of birth. Maybe the end of one world is the beginning of another, not through destruction, but through creation. A continuation of the same rhythm that has always guided existence. Things touch, they transform, and something new begins. From our tiny vantage point, such an event would seem unimaginable, terrifying even. But on the scale of eternity, it might be no more catastrophic than two clouds passing, exchanging their moisture and drifting apart again. The cosmos may not see this as tragedy, but as choreography. A slow, endless dance of realities weaving in and out of each other's reach. And when you think of it that way, the idea of a bubble collision stops feeling like the end of everything. It starts to feel like a heartbeat, a pulse in the body of an infinite cosmos. Each touch a reminder that even the universe itself grows through meeting, through contact, through change. Somewhere beyond what we can see, perhaps such a meeting is happening right now. Not violent, not loud, just two realms of existence brushing together in silence, sending out ripples that will take billions of years to reach us. And when they do, maybe they'll arrive not as a disaster, but as a whisper, a gentle rearrangement of the music we call reality. If that's the case, then every breath you take, every quiet moment under the stars might already be part of that song. A note within the harmony of universes touching in the dark and moving on. In the deep timeline of the cosmos, there is a theory that says creation is not a single event, but a rhythm, a pulse repeating quietly across eternity. Like the slow beating of a heart too vast for us to perceive, it marks beginnings not as isolated miracles, but as recurring moments in a cycle of touch, collapse, and renewal. Imagine two immense veils, invisible and weightless, drifting through a space far larger than our own. Each veil is not made of fabric, but of reality itself, the hidden geometry that gives form to stars, matter, and time. These veils are known in the language of physics as branes, short for membranes. They exist within a higher dimensional space that we cannot see, moving slowly, gracefully, bound by the quiet laws of gravity. Now imagine these branes approaching each other after a long cosmic drift. At first, nothing seems to happen, but as they draw closer, the tension between them grows. Energy begins to build, not as light, but as potential, the way two storm clouds gather charge before a lightning strike. And then, when they finally touch, the contact releases a flash beyond comprehension. A universe ignites. This is the ekpyrotic model of creation, from an ancient Greek word meaning born of fire. It proposes that our universe was not born from nothing, but from the meeting of these vast cosmic membranes. Their collision generated the heat and energy that would later cool into galaxies, planets, and life itself. It's a strange, elegant alternative to the familiar image of the Big Bang. In the standard story, the universe begins from a singularity, an infinitely dense point that explodes outward, expanding and cooling over billions of years. But in the ekpyrotic view, there was no singular point. Instead, there were two enormous universes drifting through higher space, brushing together like sheets of silk, and their brief contact created everything we know. To imagine it without mathematics, think of two waves meeting on the surface of a pond. For a moment, where their crests overlap, the water rises higher than anywhere else, a peak of energy, bright and temporary. Then the waves continue onward, leaving behind ripples that spread outward across the surface. That single peak is like the instant of creation, the momentary merging of two realities, giving rise to new motion, new matter, new time. What's beautiful about this model is that it doesn't see the beginning of our universe as a singular miracle, but as part of a larger conversation, an ongoing cycle of universes colliding, cooling, and drifting apart again. Each universe could give birth to another in an endless chain of creation and renewal. In that sense, even the death of one cosmos might be just a prelude to the birth of the next. And this rhythm might not be as abstract as it sounds. The idea that everything arises from contact, from relationship, echoes throughout nature. Stars are born when clouds of gas collide and compress. Elements form when nuclei merge in their fiery cores. Even life itself begins when molecules meet in the right conditions and form bonds. The universe, at every scale, seems to know this dance, a choreography of meeting and transformation. It's not hard to see a quiet poetry in that pattern. Perhaps the cosmos itself is built upon the same principle that guides human existence. Connection gives rise to being. Just as two people's lives can intersect and create something new, an idea, a friendship, a story, two universes can meet and give birth to light, matter, and time. In the ekpyrotic picture, this cycle could repeat forever. After billions of years of expansion, the universe grows cold and empty. Galaxies drift apart until even light has nowhere left to go. And then, in that endless quiet, the great branes drift again, drawn together by the faint pull of gravity. Another collision, another spark, another dawn. To describe this idea, mathematically, physicists speak of extra dimensions, not as fantasy, but as unseen directions beyond our familiar three. Just as a sheet of paper is flat but can bend into a higher dimension when folded, our universe might be one surface in a greater structure. The equations say these hidden dimensions could cradle multiple universes, each parallel, each occasionally brushing against the other like notes in a repeating chord. But we don't need the symbols to feel its truth. All we need is the image of two invisible worlds colliding in silence, their meeting bright enough to light the stars, their touch gentle enough to vanish in an instant. When you look up at the night sky, the light from every star carries a faint memory of that first contact. Each photon, each particle of light, was born in the aftermath of that cosmic fire. It has travelled for nearly 14 billion years to reach you, and in that journey it has crossed expanding space, woven through clusters of galaxies, brushed the edges of darkness, and finally landed softly in your eye. That light is ancient, but still warm, a survivor of the universe's first embrace. You can almost think of it as a message, a quiet reminder that everything we see, everything we are, began with a meeting. And if creation truly repeats, then somewhere beyond what we can perceive, another pair of universes might already be approaching each other, preparing for their own moment of contact. It might take trillions of years before the next spark ignites, but time, in this grand rhythm, is patient. To the cosmos, waiting is part of being. And perhaps that's why the universe feels so calm, because it has done this before and will do it again. Maybe that's what eternity really means. Not endless time, but endless renewal. A heartbeat that never stops, only pauses long enough for the next breath of creation to begin. And as you listen to that thought, the quiet between one universe and the next begins to feel not like an empty void, but like an inhale before the next sigh of existence. Sometimes when you gaze at the night sky, it feels like looking into a memory you can't quite recall. The light that reaches you has travelled for billions of years, crossing vast gulfs of silence, bending through invisible threads of gravity. Every star, every faint flicker in the distance carries a secret from a time long before we existed. But what if, hidden in that light, there were messages not just from our own universe, but from another one? For decades, astronomers have searched the heavens for clues of contact beyond our cosmic bubble. They look for tiny asymmetries, faint distortions, or unusual patterns in the background glow that fills the universe. The search doesn't aim to find alien civilizations, but rather evidence that another realm, another bubble, may once have brushed against ours. The afterglow of creation, that ancient field of radiation bathing the cosmos, still carries tiny fluctuations, hot and cold spots, ripples that reveal how matter once clumped together to form galaxies. But scattered among these patterns could lie something stranger, circles or rings slightly warmer or cooler than expected, subtle and symmetric, as if an unseen hand had pressed against the sky long ago. These would be the fingerprints of a collision, the delicate scars left where one universe's edge touched another. To picture this, think of frost forming on a window pane. At first the ice spreads evenly, but occasionally something unseen touches the glass. Maybe the warmth of a fingertip, maybe the whisper of a breath, and the pattern changes. A faint ring appears, disrupting the perfect symmetry. It doesn't ruin the frost, it adds a story to it. That's what scientists search for in the cosmic background. Stories written in temperature, geometry, and light. But finding them is like trying to hear a whisper in a hurricane. The universe is filled with noise, radiation from stars, from galaxies, from the quiet hum of instruments themselves. The data must be filtered, refined, checked, and checked again. Sometimes what looks like a cosmic signature turns out to be the echo of our own technology, or the dust between stars. Yet the search continues, not because we expect an answer soon, but because the act of looking is itself a kind of devotion, an offering of curiosity to the unknown. And there's something almost human about that. Across centuries, we've looked for meaning in the heavens, in constellations, in comets, in the movement of the planets. The modern astronomer, surrounded by data and code, still does the same thing as the ancient stargazer. Listens for patterns, for rhythm, for signs that the universe is speaking. The language has changed, but the yearning remains. Some researchers believe that if a collision between universes ever happened, it could also have produced a faint gravitational hum, waves rippling through the very structure of space. These waves would be far deeper and slower than the ones caused by merging black holes. They would stretch across the whole sky, bending time ever so slightly as they passed. Detecting them would be like feeling the softest pulse in an ocean of stillness. To sense such a pulse, astronomers use pulsars, dense, spinning remnants of dead stars that flash beams of light with perfect regularity. They are nature's most precise clocks. If a vast gravitational wave passed between us and a pulsar, it would delay or speed up those flashes by the tiniest fraction of a second. By comparing many pulsars scattered across the sky, scientists can tell if the same faint rhythm passes through all of them at once. It's a quiet method, patient and poetic, listening not for sound, but for time itself breathing differently. Even if those signals are never found, the search shapes the way we see our own existence. The idea that our universe might carry the imprint of another forces us to ask, what would it mean if reality itself were part of something larger? How small are we really, if even the cosmos that contains us is just one note in a grander chord? It's easy to feel lost in that thought, to imagine our lives as dust on dust, fleeting in a multiverse of endless creation. But perhaps that's not the right way to feel. Maybe the realization that we live within something infinite is not meant to diminish us, but to connect us. To know that we are part of a process so vast, yet delicate enough to leave fingerprints on the light itself, is to sense that existence is both fragile and profound. And perhaps, in some unspoken way, our minds are already tuned to that immensity. The same curiosity that drives scientists to search for cosmic collisions lives inside every person who has ever stared into the night and wondered. When you feel that strange pull, that quiet urge to look up, it might not just be emotion, it could be resonance, a kind of remembering that the universe is not something outside of us, but something we carry within. There's a theory, whispered among philosophers and physicists alike, that consciousness might be the way the universe learns about itself. If that's true, then each time we look for these signs in the sky, each time we listen for ripples or hums, the cosmos is, in a sense, listening to itself through us. The search becomes circular, poetic, the observer and the observed woven together like reflections in an endless mirror. So even if no clear evidence of another universe ever appears, the act of searching already connects us to the infinite. It reminds us that mystery is not a flaw in our understanding, but its purpose. Because without mystery, curiosity would fall silent. And without curiosity, the universe might never have found a way to look back at itself through human eyes. When the instruments quiet and the data fades into background noise, the sky returns to stillness. The stars resume their silent shine. But if you stand outside on a clear night, perhaps you can feel what all those machines, telescopes and equations are really reaching for. The faint vibration between knowing and not knowing. The place where wonder lives. And as that feeling lingers, you might realize something simple yet extraordinary, that every time we look for signs in the sky, we also uncover shadows in our own minds, the outline of questions too large to name and too beautiful to let go. If two universes ever brush together, the first sign might not be a grand explosion or a sudden silence in the sky. It might be something small, almost tender, a change so delicate that at first no one would notice, A shift in the hue of sunlight, the faint warping of shadows, the feeling that the world has been repainted with slightly different hands. The laws of physics are like the grammar of reality. They tell matter how to move, how to bind, how to shine. These laws depend on numbers so exact that if they were altered by even the smallest fraction, everything we know would transform. The strength of gravity, the charge of an electron, the subtle relationship between light and matter, all are part of a delicate equation that allows the universe to exist in balance. But in the language of this story, we'll keep it gentle. Instead of speaking in formulas, imagine that every constant in physics is a string on a vast cosmic harp. Each one hums at a specific frequency. Together, they create the harmony that sustains stars, molecules, and thought itself. If another universe, one with its own tuning, were to overlap with ours, even slightly the chords might blend. The melody of existence would shift, and if that happened, the change would flow through everything. Light might bend a little differently as it travels, altering the way colour reaches your eyes. Red could deepen, blue could fade, gold might gleam where silver once lived. A sunset would look familiar yet strange, as though the sky were remembering something it had never seen before. At first it might seem like imagination, a trick of atmosphere or mood, but then other patterns would appear. Clocks might drift out of sync, magnetic fields could waver, the rhythm of atoms might falter just enough to make metal sing with a tone no ear had ever heard. Plants, tuned to sunlight, might change the shade of their leaves, adapting to new frequencies. The air itself could shimmer, its molecules learning to dance to a slightly altered beat. If this sounds impossible, remember that the world is sensitive to the smallest changes. The colour of a flame depends on how electrons jump between levels of energy inside an atom, a microscopic dance that determines the hue we see. If that tiny step shifted, the flame would change colour, even if it burned with the same heat. Now imagine that happening not in a candle, but everywhere. The spectrum of reality itself tilting softly but unmistakably. How would it feel to live through such a moment? The human brain, shaped to recognise familiar patterns, would struggle. You might wake one morning and feel that something in the light has changed. Not wrong, just unfamiliar. The sky feels heavier, the shadows stretch differently, the silence between sounds carries an echo you can't quite name. You'd try to compare it to memory, but memory would betray you, because even your recollection of colours would be shaped by the new laws now unfolding. What was once red might no longer exist in the same way. Your mind would search for meaning and come up empty, like trying to remember the taste of a fruit that's been erased from the world, and yet within that confusion there would be beauty. Nature adapts quickly. Life has always learned to sing in new keys. Perhaps the new sunlight would nourish the planet in ways unseen. Maybe new kinds of flowers would bloom, reflecting colours invisible before, shades that no human language could describe. We might stand beneath them, dazzled and wordless, feeling the world becoming strange and sacred again. It's easy to think of such change as catastrophe, but it might also be revelation, a reminder that reality is not fixed but living, that the universe too can evolve. The familiar comfort of physics would dissolve, yes, but in its place would arise something we have almost forgotten, the raw awe of not knowing. In truth, our own universe has already changed before, though not through collisions. Over billions of years, it has cooled, expanded, and subtly shifted its tone. The colours of the cosmos have dimmed from the blinding white of its birth to the deep gold of its middle age. Galaxies have reddened as their stars grow old. Even the very constants we believe immutable might drift over incomprehensible timescales, changing so slowly that only the cosmos itself can notice. A collision between worlds would compress that slow evolution into a single instant. A dawn where the sky no longer matches memory. It wouldn't be destruction in the human sense, not fire or apocalypse, but translation. the universe rewriting itself in a new dialect, and we, the listeners, standing in quiet amazement, learning the new words for light. The poet Rainer Maria Rilke once wrote that the world was never meant to be understood, but to be loved. In the day when colours change, that thought might become literal truth. Understanding would slip away, replaced by the need simply to witness, to let go of knowing, and to let beauty, however altered, fill the space it leaves behind. Because even in a rewritten world, there would be continuity. The air would still carry sound, the sea would still breathe against its shores, the heartbeat inside every living thing would still pulse in rhythm with something larger, the same cosmic drum that has kept time since the first spark of creation. Perhaps we would learn then that reality doesn't need to remain constant to be whole, that change, even on a cosmic scale, can be gentle, that the familiar world could fade into another without ending, the way night fades into dawn, each replacing the other without ever truly ceasing to exist. And if that day ever comes, the day the colours change, maybe humanity would not face it with fear, but with quiet wonder, looking to the sky, not asking why, but whispering how beautiful it is to still be here. For in that moment, we would realise that we have always lived inside change, that the universe has never stopped transforming, only slowed enough for us to mistake stillness for permanence, and the collision of worlds, however immense, would simply reveal the truth that was always waiting in the light, that everything is still being born. When the rules of reality shift, the world outside isn't the only thing that changes. Inside us something begins to tremble too. Memory, that fragile thread tying us to who we were, starts to slip. It's not that the past disappears, it's that the light that once illuminated it changes colour, and suddenly the shapes we thought we recognised no longer match. Imagine waking in a world almost identical to the one you knew. The streets are there, the clouds move as they always have, and yet something in your reflection feels slightly out of tune. Maybe your childhood home seems smaller, or the sound of your own name carries a tone you don't remember. You try to recall yesterday, and you can, but it feels borrowed, as though you are remembering someone else's life. If two realities ever overlapped, memory would be the most delicate thing caught in their crossing. Because memory is not carved in stone. It is woven from signals, from the chemistry and electricity that travel through the brain. And those signals depend on the laws of physics, the way atoms bind, the way energy moves. If even one of those invisible rhythms shifted, the threads of remembrance might fray. We can imagine it softly. The mind, once tuned to a single channel, begins to pick up faint interference from another. Two melodies play at once, one familiar, one hauntingly similar, but not quite right. You remember a day at the sea, but the colour of the water won't stay fixed. Sometimes it's green, sometimes a deep violet you know the world has never had. This is how memory might fracture if universes touched, not with violence, but with confusion. It would feel like déjà vu stretched to infinity. Every familiar face would shimmer with 1,000 possibilities, each one a version of someone you once knew. And in the quiet between those shifting memories, a question would rise. Who am I? If the world that shaped me no longer exists in the same form? Perhaps our minds would try to rebuild coherence the only way they know, through stories. Humans are storytellers before we are scientists. When memory falters, we invent continuity. We imagine the missing bridge. It's what the brain does every night in dreams, fills the gaps, creates meaning from fragments. So maybe, if the collision of worlds ever touched our minds, we would start dreaming awake, trying to reconcile two overlapping realities by weaving them into one. Our memories might become mosaics, part real, part imagined, stitched together by the need to stay whole. There's something almost beautiful in that idea, that even as the universe rewrites itself, consciousness fights gently to keep a narrative alive, It doesn't resist the change, it adapts, reinterprets, reshapes the new rules into a new self. Like a tree bending in the wind, identity might sway but not break. In that sense, the ghosts of memory would not be haunting in the fearful way we think. They would be companions, echoes of the reality that once was, whispering to help us find our way in the new one. You might hear them in fragments of thought that seem misplaced, or in sensations that feel impossibly old. A song that no longer exists might hum in the back of your mind. A scent might bring tears, not because it reminds you of something lost, but because it belongs to a universe that no longer overlaps this one, and yet somehow you still remember. It raises a quiet, aching question. If our memories shape who we are, and those memories change, does the self dissolve, or does it simply evolve just as reality does? Perhaps the answer lies not in holding on to what was, but in learning to remember differently, to treat memory not as a record, but as a living bridge between what has been and what is becoming. Think of it like music again. A melody can change key and still remain recognizable. The theme continues, transformed but intact. Maybe we too could continue, not as exact replicas of who we were, but as harmonies of our former selves, tuned to a slightly altered universe. This idea, though poetic, echoes something real in neuroscience. Even in our ordinary world, memories are not static recordings. They are rewritten each time we recall them. When you remember a childhood moment, your brain reconstructs it anew, influenced by who you are now. Memory is already fluid, a gentle editing of the past every time it's summoned. So perhaps, if reality itself were rewritten, the mind would simply continue doing what it always has, adjusting, adapting, composing itself again in the new language of physics. And maybe, in that adaptation, we'd find an unexpected calm. Because losing certainty doesn't have to mean losing meaning. The mind's resilience, its ability to dream through chaos, might be what carries us forward. Like sailors guided by stars that have shifted, we'd learn to navigate by the faint glow of new constellations, unfamiliar, but still leading us home. Over time, the confusion would settle. The two melodies would merge, forming a new harmony. Memory would stabilize in its new rhythm, and the ghosts, those gentle remnants of the old world, would fade into the background, not gone, but integrated. They'd become part of the silent knowledge that existence is change, and that identity is not a fixed island but a current moving through the stream of time. And perhaps, in quiet moments, we'd still sense them. The faint warmth of something remembered but unreachable. A half-familiar word, a landscape glimpsed only in dreams. They would remind us that even if worlds collide, nothing ever truly vanishes. It only changes form, waiting for us to rediscover it in another light. So if one day you feel that strange dissonance, that sense of remembering something that never quite happened, don't be afraid. It might just be the universe speaking to itself through you, practicing its own memory, reminding itself of what it once was and what it's becoming. Because you too are part of that cosmic remembrance. Every thought, every recollection, every dream is the universe tracing its own history across your mind. A living archive written in starlight, revising itself with every breath. And if all realities ever merge, the last thing to fade will not be light or matter, but memory, carrying, within its flickering, the tender proof that even when everything changes, something of us always remembers how to be. There's a quiet paradox hidden inside the human mind. In order to remember clearly, we must also learn to forget. Memory isn't a fixed library that fills over time. It's a living field that must constantly clear space for new growth. Forgetting, strange as it sounds, is not a flaw, but a form of renewal. It's the mind's way of pruning old paths so that thought can move freely again. If the fabric of reality were ever rewritten, if universes truly brushed against one another and altered the laws that hold our neurons together, forgetting might become something more than a natural process. It might become a physical one. The chemistry of thought, the silent exchange between electrical pulses and molecules, depends on constants that define how energy moves and how matter binds. If those constants shifted even slightly, then memory itself might begin to dissolve in new ways, not out of weakness, but because the very rhythm of remembering had changed. But let's stay away from equations and think of it instead as a garden. The brain is like a forest that grows its own paths. Every thought leaves a trail through that forest, a faint mark in the soil, a branch bent aside. When we recall something, we walk that trail again, wearing it smoother each time. Yet if the soil beneath those roots changes, if the air becomes heavier or the light bends differently, the forest grows in new directions. The old paths fade, replaced by others. That is forgetting, not erasure but transformation. Scientists describe memory as patterns of connection, tiny pulses that strengthen each time they repeat. When we learn, when we love, when we fear, those pulses find new routes across the landscape of the brain. But they are fragile. They depend on timing, on a kind of internal rhythm. If the laws that guide that rhythm ever shifted, say the way light interacts with matter, or the balance of charge between atoms, then thought itself would find a new tempo. What was once a sharp recollection might now echo faintly, slower, softer. The mind would not fail. It would simply start composing in another key. In a world remade by a cosmic collision, perhaps this would be the first mercy. To forget is to let go of the old physics, the old limitations. A mind clinging to the precise logic of the world that once was might shatter under the strain of change. But a mind that allows forgetting, that yields like a reed in the wind, could survive. It would remember what matters not as data, but as feeling. It would trade accuracy for peace. Even here on Earth, in the stable laws of our universe, forgetting is part of adaptation. The brain edits its own history every time we sleep. During dreams, memories are replayed and reshaped. Some are kept, others fade, like waves smoothing footprints in sand. It's why a dream that feels profound at dawn can vanish by noon, leaving only a trace of mood, a scent, a colour. The mind, in its wisdom, knows that to live well, not everything must be remembered. So imagine a universe that learns this same lesson on a cosmic scale. After a collision, when old structures collapse and new ones begin to form, the cosmos might go through its own kind of sleep. A quiet period of adjustment where it lets go of the energy and information that no longer fits its new form. Matter cools, energy redistributes, and the universe forgets the sharp edges of its birth. What remains is balance. If consciousness is indeed part of that cosmic fabric, a spark of awareness woven into space itself, then perhaps forgetting is how the universe heals its own mind. Each world, each life, each memory becomes a note in the vast composition, fading when its melody is complete, leaving room for the next. And if this forgetting reached us personally, it might not feel like loss at all. It might feel like peace, like the slow dimming of a light at the end of the day. The details would slip away. Names, faces, the sound of familiar streets. But beneath that gentle fading, something deeper might remain. The emotional shape of memory, the pulse of love, the warmth of connection. Those might persist even if the world's physical frame changed completely. There's a tenderness in that idea. Imagine walking through a world that has forgotten its past, and yet still feels kind. The trees may grow in new patterns, the stars may shine with slightly altered colours, but the quiet urge to care, to reach for meaning, would still flicker inside every heart. That spark, too ancient to belong to any single universe, might be the true constant, the one value that even colliding realities cannot erase. Physicists sometimes speak of entropy, the measure of disorder, the inevitable drift of systems toward complexity and decay. But perhaps, in a poetic sense, entropy is also the universe's way of forgetting. Over time, the sharp outlines of structures blur, stars burn out, galaxies drift apart, memories fade into background light. Yet from that seeming loss, new order emerges, new stars, new stories, new beginnings. Forgetting, then, is not destruction. It's how the cosmos makes room for creation. So what would the physics of forgetting look like if it unfolded within us? Maybe it would be the calm acceptance that comes after grief when pain softens into understanding. Maybe it would be the way we adapt to change without realizing it, how a new reality becomes normal simply because we stop remembering what came before. Forgetting might be the most humane part of physics, the law that allows not only matter but meaning to move forward. You might think that a universe capable of forgetting sounds tragic, but it might be the only reason existence remains gentle. Without forgetting, there would be no end to the weight of memory. Every sorrow, every collision, every failed star preserved forever. There would be no space left for new light. So, if ever the cosmos rewrites itself and our memories begin to fade, perhaps we should not resist. Let them go softly, as leaves fall when autumn cools them down. For what remains after forgetting may be closer to truth than anything we can hold in mind. The simple awareness of being here, alive in this moment, breathing in a universe that is still learning to remember and to let go. And maybe, somewhere out there, in another reality born from the collision of worlds, another version of you is remembering something you've forgotten, carrying that piece forward so it's never truly lost. Between you both, the whole story continues. At first, no one noticed. The skies still glittered, the hum of machines still filled the cities, and the morning sun still spilled across the walls of observatories. But deep inside those observatories, where lenses focused on distant galaxies, something had gone subtly wrong. Equations that once matched perfectly no longer fit the data. Constants that had anchored the universe, gravity, light, magnetism, began to tremble, just slightly off-key. A telescope in Chile recorded a faint shift in a quasar's light. Its spectrum stretched in ways no calculation could explain. Hours later, another observatory on the other side of the world confirmed the same anomaly, though their instruments were calibrated differently. The first reaction was practical: recalibrate, restart, check for software errors. But by the end of the day, no amount of adjustment could make the numbers align. And then, the stars themselves began to drift. Not physically, at least not yet, but on the maps. Astronomers who compared their nightly images found that the constellations had ever so slightly shifted from their proper places. Orion's belt no longer formed a perfect line. The Pleiades cluster seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting as if the sky itself were exhaling. It was a small thing, easily dismissed as atmospheric distortion, until someone realized that the distortion was identical everywhere. The same change appeared across hemispheres, continents, and time zones. The heavens had altered their rhythm and no one knew why. In laboratories, precision instruments began to fail quietly. Atomic clocks, those perfect keepers of time built upon the vibrations of cesium atoms, began to disagree. Some ran slower, some faster, as if time itself was stretching unevenly across the planet. In particle accelerators, beams refused to collide at predicted points. Subatomic paths once beautifully consistent now curved in ways that defied every known law. At first, scientists responded as they always do, with calm persistence. Theories bloomed overnight. Maybe a local gravitational wave, a hidden burst of energy from a collapsing star, or an unseen distortion in the magnetic field. Teams checked data against satellites, then against the cosmic background light. Nothing matched. There was no event, no explosion, no measurable cause, just an invisible quietness spreading outward. News began to seep through in fragments, faint, uncertain, carried by voices that did not yet dare to panic. "We're observing anomalies," someone said in a televised briefing. "Unexplained inconsistencies." The public didn't understand, and the scientists themselves had no words gentle enough to explain that the very framework of understanding was beginning to unravel. In classrooms, physics teachers faced chalkboards full of rules that no longer described the world. The formulas still looked elegant, but they had lost their pulse, symbols without certainty. The chemistry of familiar elements began to waver. Reactions that should have produced light produced only warmth. Compounds that should have been stable began to glow faintly, as if unsure of their own existence, and then came the silence. Not an absence of sound, but the silence that follows realization. That moment when speech becomes useless because the thing being described no longer fits inside language. In one laboratory, a physicist paused mid-sentence during a lecture, looked at her equations and could not continue. "It's not working," she whispered. And then, for the first time in centuries, science itself hesitated. Around the world, governments convened emergency councils. Religious leaders gave sermons on the nature of change. Economists, trying to forecast a future that no longer obeyed its own definitions, stared at graphs that refused to behave. The world entered a strange calm, not from understanding, but from collective disbelief. There were still lights, cities, and people moving through their daily routines. Airplanes flew, phones rang, and tides rose and fell as if nothing had happened. But under that surface, the scaffolding of reality had loosened. Predictions no longer predicted. Instruments no longer measured. The familiar, once so obedient to human reasoning, had become unknowable. And yet, amid that quiet collapse, something profound occurred. Without the steady hum of certainty, people began to listen, really listen, to the silence that followed. In observatories, scientists sat beside their dormant telescopes, not calculating, just watching the sky as their ancestors once had. Long before numbers described the stars, they began to notice small things again, the flicker of auroras where they shouldn't be, the way shadows deepened at twilight, the hush between the pulse of machinery. For generations, science had been humanity's great song of order, its proof that the universe could be understood. But now, as the notes fell out of tune, a new kind of humility emerged. It was as if the cosmos itself had whispered, "You have listened well, now rest." And so, people did what they had almost forgotten how to do. They stepped outside their domes and labs and looked upward without expectation. Children in cities began pointing out constellations that didn't exist the night before. Sailors charted new stars, unaware that they were writing the first maps of a changed reality. In small towns, power flickered, and for the first time in living memory, the dark returned. Not as fear, but as wonder. It was not an apocalypse, not even a collapse, but a suspension. A great cosmic breath held between what was known and what was coming next. And in that breath, all the voices that had once spoken in confidence, the teachers, the leaders, the scientists, fell quiet together, not in defeat, but in reverence. For perhaps the first time since humanity began naming the stars, no one had an explanation. The universe had rewritten its sentence mid-word, and all we could do was listen to the pause. And in that stillness something unexpected grew. The faint awareness that maybe, just maybe, knowledge itself was not ending, but transforming. That silence was not emptiness, but space for a new language to form. One not built on formulas or proofs, but on attention, awe, and the willingness to begin again. And so, as telescopes turned toward unfamiliar skies and equations faded into quiet chalk dust, humanity entered a strange and gentle night. A night not of fear, but of waiting. for the first whisper of a new understanding to rise out of the silence. In the days after science fell silent, the world did not end. The ocean still moved with the moon, and dawn still returned, though it arrived in unfamiliar shades of gold. Yet everywhere, the ground of understanding had shifted. The invisible foundation on which modern life stood, that quiet trust that nature followed rules, had turned to mist. Humanity, for all its confidence, found itself adrift once more in mystery. At first came confusion. People wanted explanations, and when none arrived, they built their own. News networks filled the air with experts and theories, each one certain and each one contradicting the last. Governments tried to issue calm statements, but their words sounded rehearsed, hollow against the growing strangeness outside. In one country, a group of physicists announced that reality was recalibrating, that nature was correcting itself like a computer restoring its settings. In another, religious leaders declared it a sign of divine renewal, the world being rewritten by a higher will. And in between these voices, millions simply stared at the sky, watching the constellations shift like a slow-moving dream. The measure of truth had fractured. In cosmology, there's a concept called the measure problem, a puzzle about how to define probability when the universe is infinite. When everything that can happen does happen somewhere, what does it even mean to say something is likely? In that paradox, humanity now found itself mirrored. When no single explanation fits, every belief becomes its own small universe, self-contained, luminous, and unprovable. Cities began to splinter along these lines of thought. Some neighbourhoods clung to old science, keeping the rituals of a logic alive like fading traditions. They held nightly data vigils, recording whatever could still be measured, though the instruments disagreed. Others turned inward, embracing faiths both ancient and improvised, building temples from recycled glass, painting symbols of light on their rooftops to speak with the heavens. There were protests too, though even those felt different. Not riots of anger, but gatherings of sound. People shouting not for justice or freedom, but for meaning itself. "Tell us what's true," they cried, though no one could. And slowly, as days blurred into weeks, a kind of quiet acceptance began to replace outrage. The human spirit, exhausted by contradiction, started to seek harmony instead. Some communities decided to live by observation alone, taking the world as it came. Farmers stopped consulting almanacs and instead listened to the air, learning the new rhythm of rainfall by scent and wind. Artists found inspiration in the uncertainty, painting skies that no longer matched any map, writing music that bent between keys the way light bent through the altered atmosphere. In small ways, people adapted. They stopped demanding the universe make sense and started noticing it again. A child would point to the horizon and ask why the sunset now carried two shadows instead of one, and instead of reaching for an answer, her parents would smile and say, "Because tonight the sky wanted to." Still, there were darker corners too. Some minds could not bear the shapelessness. Without the scaffolding of certainty, they built walls of fear. There were whispers of reality cults forming, groups that refused to accept the world's change, trying to hold their surroundings still through ritual or denial. But even their resistance was fragile, fading under the sheer persistence of the new world. You cannot chain the sea with logic, nor halt the sky with prayer. And amid this tapestry of confusion, a quiet revolution began. Scientists who had lost their equations started writing poems. Economists began studying patterns of emotion instead of markets. Even the most rational institutions began to rediscover language older than mathematics, the language of metaphor. They realized that while formulas may fail, meaning can still be measured in stories. It was as though humanity, stripped of its armor of certainty, remembered its first instrument, wonder. Not the wonder of discovery, but of coexistence, of standing beneath a sky that does not need to explain itself. A few called it regression, a return to superstition. But to many, it felt like relief. The world, for the first time in centuries, began to slow down. The rush for progress paused, the constant need to innovate, to outpace, to calculate, all softened into stillness. People started lighting candles again, not because electricity had failed, but because flame was simpler, a warm light that flickered, changed, and needed tending. A reminder that even in instability, beauty persists. And then something unexpected began to happen. Conversations changed. Without the structure of proof, language grew gentler. People spoke less to convince and more to connect. The edge in their voices dulled, replaced by curiosity. A physicist might sit beside a monk and realise that, though their vocabularies differed, their silence meant the same thing. The old world, built on certainty, had been an empire, strong, glittering but brittle. Now that empire was dissolving, replaced by smaller realms of shared humility. Empires crumble when their foundations crack, but communities bloom in uncertainty. When knowledge faltered, empathy filled the space it left. Of course, not everyone found peace. Some nights, despair still spread like fog. People feared that meaning itself was evaporating. But those nights, too, grew fewer. The human heart, it seemed, had an ancient instinct for adaptation. Beneath the confusion, something tender was forming. A collective realization that maybe life doesn't need answers as much as it needs continuity. A musician, interviewed during those strange months, said something that captured the feeling of the age. We used to tune our instruments to a standard pitch. Now the pitch drifts every day, but it's all right. We've learned to tune by ear again. That phrase lingered, whispered across cities and through the cracks of the internet that still flickered in and out of function. Tune by ear again. It became a quiet mantra for the new world, because in the end, that was what humanity had always done. Long before it measured gravity or traced atoms, it listened to wind, to waves, to one another. And perhaps the collapse of certainty was never a punishment, but an invitation to listen once more. Maybe the universe, in its strange unfolding, was teaching us that truth does not have to be absolute to be meaningful, that a life can still be whole, even when the rules have changed. That when the stars rearrange themselves, it is not the end of navigation, only the beginning of learning how to steer by new light. And so, amid the chaos of unknowing, people began to find peace in small things again, in warmth, in voice, and in each other. In the years after the sky changed, the world began to grow differently. The ground itself seemed to hum with a faint energy, not loud, not violent, but alive, in a new way. The old science, the one that once charted the rise of mountains and the orbit of planets, could no longer describe the rhythm of things. Yet life, as it always does, listened and adapted. Gravity, though still present, no longer felt uniform. The air was lighter in some places, denser in others. Trees leaned toward the altered pull, growing at strange angles, their branches curving in ways that defied the old geometry. Oceans breathed with new tides, drawn not only by the moon, but by unseen motions deeper in the planet's crust. The air shimmered faintly, as if every particle had discovered its own quiet pulse. Farmers, who once relied on calendars and measurements, began reading the new world by intuition. Crops that had failed for decades suddenly flourished in unexpected soil, while others withered without warning. In the altered sunlight, the leaves of certain plants took on subtle iridescence, a sheen of blue and green that moved like liquid across their surface. Some called it a mutation, others a blessing. In the cities, glass towers that once stood rigid began to warp imperceptibly, not from decay but from the gradual bending of the laws that held them upright. Architects learned to build differently, with curves and flexible joints that could sway with the new rhythm of the ground. Light no longer reflected the same way. It bent around corners in slow, graceful arcs, creating halos that followed people through the streets. There was fear at first, but the fear softened as people realised that the world had not ended. It had only transformed. The air remained breathable, the seas still carried fish, the earth still turned. What had changed was the relationship between things. The invisible conversation between matter and energy, sound and silence, time and motion. The old physics had faded like a forgotten language, and a new one was being spoken, one that humans could not yet translate but could feel. And in that feeling a strange serenity emerged. People began noticing details they had ignored for centuries. The flicker of light between raindrops, the way shadows seemed to move of their own accord at dusk, the faint music that came from power lines at night. It wasn't that these phenomena had never existed. It was that the new reality had tuned human senses differently. The world had always been singing, we just hadn't known how to listen. Scientists who had once studied formulas turned instead to patterns. They filled notebooks not with equations but with sketches of curves and waves, tracing how light danced across water, how the air bent around heat, how gravity seemed to sigh near mountains. They spoke of resonance, of the way life adjusted to maintain balance even when the rules changed. What once required precision now thrived on sensitivity, not measurement, but empathy. And slowly, life began to evolve. Small insects developed translucent shells that refracted the altered light into soft glows, turning the night into a quiet garden of colour. Birds learned to navigate by sound rather than magnetism, weaving melodies into the wind to find their way. Even humans noticed subtle changes, improved night vision in some, a new sensitivity to certain frequencies in others. Evolution had not stopped to ask permission. It had simply continued its patient work, sculpting harmony from uncertainty. Societies changed with it. The drive to dominate nature gave way to a desire to cooperate with it. People realized that the Earth no longer responded well to control. It thrived instead on attentiveness. Cities became quieter, built around water and wind, designed to move with the world instead of against it. The old engines that had once roared with fuel were replaced by simpler devices that drew power from vibration, from the natural resonance that hummed within the ground. Children born into this new era grew up unafraid of its strangeness. They played beneath skies that shimmered with new colours, their laughter carrying across fields that glowed faintly at night. They didn't miss the old blue of the atmosphere or the steady constellations. For them, this was the only world they had ever known. When elders spoke of how things used to be, it sounded less like history and more like mythology, a tale of a stiffer, quieter planet that had not yet learned to breathe. There were poets who called this shift the translation, as though the universe had rewritten itself into another language and invited us to read it anew. They said the collision between worlds had not been a war or a merging, but a dialogue, one reality teaching another how to listen. In that sense, the transformation was not destruction, but evolution on a cosmic scale. Just as music changes when new instruments join the orchestra, the universe had expanded its harmony. Life was not ending, it was being retuned. And perhaps deep down this was how it had always worked. Every major change in history, from the birth of stars to the rise of consciousness, had come from imbalance, from collisions and convergences. The universe grows not by staying still, but by daring to transform. One night, a young girl asked her grandmother, "Do you miss how things were before?" The old woman thought for a while before answering. "No," she said softly. "I miss not knowing that change could be this gentle." That phrase travelled like a quiet truth through the settlements of the New World. It became a proverb, written on walls and whispered in gatherings. Change can be gentle, and indeed it was. The new ecology of existence was not chaos, it was cooperation. It was the realization that adaptation, on every level, physical, emotional, cosmic, was not a struggle, but a form of grace. Humans, plants, animals, even the patterns of wind, all were learning to move with the new rhythm. The laws of physics might have rewritten themselves, but the law of life had remained the same, persistence through transformation. So perhaps this was the message hidden within the collision all along, that creation is not a single act, but an ongoing conversation between what was and what will be. Every ending is simply another way for the universe to ask, can you still hear me? Can you still sing along? And humanity, having learned to listen again, answered not with words or equations, but with quiet presence, by living, by breathing, by being part of the song. Every story that has ever been told begins in light. Whether it's the faint shimmer of a firefly, the glow of a campfire, or the first radiance of a newborn star, light is memory made visible. Even now, as we look across the cosmos, the starlight that touches our eyes carries whispers of its origins, fragments of time stretched thin across infinity. In a way, the universe has always remembered itself through light, and if the ekpyrotic story, that ancient dance of colliding worlds, is true, then this act of remembrance might go deeper than we imagine. Every time two realities meet, they leave behind a trace, like overlapping brushstrokes on the same cosmic canvas. Those brushstrokes never fade completely. They echo through the structure of space, preserved as vibrations, temperature and rhythm. Long after the collision cools, those vibrations continue, shaping everything that follows. Our universe, then, might not be a self-contained chapter. It could be a memory written in the margins of another, a continuation of a conversation that began long before the first atom formed. The light that fills our sky, the warmth in our bones, the very ticking of time, all may be remnants of that dialogue. And if that's true, then we ourselves are living proof that the universe remembers. There is something humbling in that idea. When we speak of memory, we often mean recollection, a mind retrieving images, sounds, emotions. But the universe remembers differently. It doesn't recall moments as we do, it carries them forward as patterns. A supernova's light may fade, but the elements it scattered become part of new stars, new worlds, and eventually living beings who can look up and wonder what they are made of. The memory of the explosion survives, not as a picture, but as presence. In that sense, every element inside us, carbon, iron, calcium, is a memory, not metaphorically, but literally. These atoms were forged in ancient stars that lived and died billions of years ago. Each time you breathe, you inhale particles that once drifted through another sky. You're breathing the recollection of creation. And when universes collide, when one era ends and another begins, perhaps that pattern of inheritance continues on a larger scale. The ashes of one cosmos become the seeds of another. Old rules dissolve, but their residue remains, guiding, shaping, suggesting. Even in transformation there is continuity. Some physicists say that the faint background light that fills all of space, the same one we've spoken of before, is like the universe's own memory. It records everything that has ever happened in the form of temperature and texture. Every wave, every burst, every whisper of energy leaves an imprint upon that ancient glow. If we could decode it perfectly, we might read the autobiography of existence itself, but perhaps we don't need to. Maybe that memory already lives through us. Our curiosity, our longing to understand, might itself be the echo of a universe remembering its origins, a self-awareness scattered across countless minds. When you look at the stars and feel that quiet pull of recognition, that sense that you've seen this before though you know you haven't, it might be because part of you truly has. The atoms that compose your eyes once shone as light. The cosmos looks at itself through you and recalls what it felt like to burn. And even if our world fades, if this universe someday cools and collapses, giving way to another, that memory will not be lost. It will be carried forward, translated into new forms. The data of our existence, though no longer stored in minds or machines, will remain as structure, encoded in the curvature of new space, in the energy that replaces us. Nothing is ever truly gone. It only changes the language of its being. Think of it like music. A melody may end, but the air that carried its notes continues to vibrate, ever so faintly. The next song that fills that same air will carry traces of the one before it. The resonance never fully disappears. Perhaps that is how universes remember, through continuity of vibration. One reality hums a note, another picks it up, and together they form a harmony that stretches across eternity. This thought is strangely comforting. It means that memory is not confined to minds or time. It means that every life, every gesture of kindness, every act of creation, no matter how small, becomes part of the universe's ongoing memory. When you laugh, when you forgive, when you imagine something new, you alter the pattern slightly. The echo expands, the cosmos listens and keeps it. In the ancient mythologies of many cultures, people believed the heavens recorded every action, that stars were witnesses to human lives. Perhaps they were more right than they knew, not because the stars watch us in the way gods might, but because the atoms that once composed them now flow through us. The universe doesn't observe, it participates. Its memory is distributed, living, breathing, learning through everything that moves and feels. So even if worlds collide again, even if all familiar forms vanish, we need not imagine oblivion. The moment of contact, the spark of creation, the laughter of civilizations, the art, the dreams, they'll remain, folded into the next dawn. Every ending folds into a new beginning, and every beginning carries the DNA of everything that came before. If you could listen deeply enough, perhaps you'd hear it, the soft murmur of existence remembering itself. Not in words, not in symbols, but in the steady hum of being. It's there in the rhythm of your heartbeat, in the shimmer of stars, in the gentle pull of gravity that still binds everything together. A silent declaration that nothing, not light, not love, not thought, is ever truly forgotten. And maybe that's what we are meant to learn from all of this. That the universe is not a cold expanse of emptiness, but a vast field of memory and renewal. It remembers because it is made of stories, and we, each of us, are one of them. So if one day you stand under a different sky, and the constellations no longer match the names you know, do not grieve. Somewhere in the quiet layers of the cosmos, this sky, the one above you now, still glows, preserved in the memory of light. And when the next universe opens its eyes, it will remember us, not as we are, but as warmth, as rhythm, as the gentle pattern of beings who once loved and wondered beneath the stars. If universes can merge, if their edges can touch and weave together, then perhaps the boundaries between realities are not walls but seams, places where new patterns are born. The scientists who once feared collisions imagined chaos, annihilation, or unmaking. But what if the aftermath is creation of a subtler kind? A blending, like colours dissolving into one another to form new shades that have never existed before. When two worlds overlap, their physics don't simply cancel each other out. They converse, their laws negotiate, their energies harmonise until a shared balance is found. You can think of it like two different songs played at once. At first there's dissonance, noise, confusion, rhythm out of step, but slowly, as the notes adjust, something new emerges, a chord, a harmony that neither melody could have formed alone. The universe learns to sing in a new key. That may be what happens when realities touch. Not destruction, but synthesis. A hybrid world bearing traces of both its parents becomes a living testament to coexistence. It's an image that feels almost human. Two perspectives, once incompatible, meeting and discovering common rhythm. In such a world, even consciousness might evolve differently. If the laws of matter change, then the rules of thought, which are also patterns of matter, might shift as well. Awareness could become more fluid, more expansive. Perhaps minds would no longer be confined to single bodies, but stretch gently through the fabric of space, touching others not through language, but resonance. There's an idea in quantum physics, one that has often been wrapped in mystery, that everything is connected at a fundamental level. The particles that make up your body were once entangled with others across the universe. They share a memory of togetherness. Change one, and its partner responds no matter the distance between them. It's not magic. It's simply how the smallest threads of reality are woven. If consciousness is born from such threads, then maybe what we call a soul is not something separate from the universe, but its reflection, awareness folding back upon itself. When two worlds merge, their underlying fabrics entangle. Their realities interlace like two voices humming the same note in slightly different tones. The result is not a fracture, but an echo, a hybrid resonance that allows thought to exist in more than one form. You can imagine it softly, a field of awareness spreading through a newly blended cosmos, alive in every atom, learning to feel in ways that no previous world had allowed. Life would not vanish. It would evolve into a shared intelligence, woven from the memory of both realities. Perhaps it would perceive time not as a line, but as a living texture. The way we feel wind moving through our fingers. If that sounds abstract, think of it in simpler terms. Imagine a dream that starts to mix with another person's dream. At first, the images blur. Two landscapes folding into one, two sets of memories merging into unfamiliar scenes. But then, instead of collapsing, the dream stabilizes. It becomes a shared space, a place both recognized though neither created it alone. That's what a hybrid world might be. A dream the universe learns to dream together. Some philosophers have speculated that consciousness is the universe's way of observing itself. If that's true, then a collision between worlds might be the moment the cosmos learns to see from two perspectives at once. The birth of a new kind of awareness, one that no longer asks, "What am I?" but "What are we?" This new form of being would not erase individuality, it would expand it. Just as a single drop of water can still exist within the ocean, each consciousness would retain its flavour, its tone, even as it joined a greater harmony. You would still be you, but your thoughts might carry harmonics from others, blending insights and emotions into patterns no single mind could produce. It's tempting to call such an existence divine, but perhaps it's simply natural. The next step in the universe's long tradition of complexity. From particles to atoms, from atoms to stars, from stars to life, each stage has brought new forms of connection. Maybe the merging of worlds is just the next act in that same play, one where even thought becomes communal, and awareness spreads like light through stained glass, refracting into infinite colours yet belonging to the same sun. And what would it feel like to live in such a world? Maybe communication would no longer require speech. Meaning would move like ripples through shared experience. When you felt joy, others would feel its echo. When you mourned, comfort would arise not from words, but from the resonance of collective empathy. There would be no need to explain yourself. Your essence would already be understood. In a sense, this might be what people have always sought through art, music and love. Moments when boundaries dissolve, when one soul feels close enough to another that separation seems like an illusion. We experience fragments of that unity now, in fleeting seconds when we lose ourselves in beauty or compassion. Perhaps in the merged worlds to come, that feeling would become the baseline of existence, harmony as reality itself. You might wonder, though, what becomes of death in such a universe. Would individuality still fade? Or would it dissolve into that shared consciousness like a drop returning to the ocean? Maybe it wouldn't be an end at all, but a transition, awareness releasing its singular form and joining the great pattern that endures, a continuity not of memory, but of presence. There's something profoundly comforting about that thought. It means the essence of who we are, our capacity to feel, to perceive, to connect, is not fragile. It's woven into the same threads that hold the stars together. Even if worlds merge, even if the universe rewrites itself, that awareness continues. It adapts, it becomes the new song. So perhaps what we call a soul is simply the universe learning to hear itself in more than one key, a melody that began in a single world but now echoes through many. Every thought, every act of kindness, every breath is a note in that cosmic harmony. And the more worlds intertwine, the richer the music becomes. And somewhere, in the quiet space between the stars, that music still plays, soft, infinite, and patient, waiting for us to remember that we were always part of its song. For all the vastness of the universe, for all its collisions and rebirths, there is still something profoundly sacred about this one small world. Even if countless realities exist, worlds overlapping like petals in an infinite flower, there remains only one where this exact moment unfolds, you sitting quietly, hearing these words, breathing the air that has passed through oceans and forests, carrying the memory of clouds. Among the infinity of possible worlds, this one, with its imperfect skies and uneven beauty, feels immeasurably precious. Perhaps it's because fragility gives things their depth. A diamond is only brilliant because it can shatter. A sunset is only luminous because it fades. The finite allows us to touch the infinite without being consumed by it. Scientists sometimes speak of the anthropic principle, the idea that the universe appears finely tuned for life because if it weren't, we wouldn't be here to notice. But beyond the mathematics of chance, there's something more intimate in that thought, the awareness that existence didn't have to be this way, yet somehow it is. A billion small balances hold our world together, the pull of gravity, the tilt of Earth's axis, the fragile chemistry of air and blood. If any one of these was slightly different, we might not be here at all. It's easy to forget that miracle in the rush of days. We treat stability as a given, when in truth it's a delicate equilibrium, like a note sustained on the edge of silence. Every breath you take is the result of that balance. Oxygen meeting carbon, heart meeting rhythm, time meeting consciousness. You are the product of cosmic precision wrapped in human vulnerability. And yet, there's comfort in that vulnerability. It means we belong here, not as observers standing apart, but as participants in the same fragile harmony. The molecules that make up your body are ancient wanderers, atoms forged in stars, cooled in comets, dissolved in rain, and gathered into form only to one day return. The world is not a stage set for you to cross. It's the very fabric you are woven from. When you realise that, the ordinary becomes luminous, the way sunlight glints on a glass of water, the warmth of a hand resting against another, the soft murmur of leaves shifting in wind. Each moment carries the entire history of the universe folded within it. When you look at a leaf, you're also seeing the fusion of stars that made its carbon, the ancient storms that carved the soil beneath it, the improbable chain of living things that carried sunlight from one age to another until it reached your eyes. Even the concept of here, this singular, temporary presence, is extraordinary. Among infinite possibilities, this arrangement of light and sound, this specific instant of awareness, exists only once. You could call it a statistical miracle, or you could call it grace. Either way, it's fleeting, and that's what makes it matter. There's an old paradox in physics. The more precisely you try to measure something's position, the less certain you become of its motion. The same seems true for life. The more we cling to permanence, the more it slips through our fingers. To live fully, we must let the present move, not to hold it still, but to feel it pass. Perhaps that's why, even in the grandest theories of multiple worlds, people still look up at the same sky. We might imagine countless versions of ourselves living different lives in the parallel universes, yet what truly anchors us is the simplicity of this one. The single sunrise we can see, the single heartbeat we can hear. Infinity is too vast to love, but this fragile slice of existence, we can hold close. Maybe that's what it means to be human in a cosmos of endless possibility, to love what is finite, to care for what can be lost. Every time we cherish something transient, a melody, a friendship, a fading light, we defy the cold statistics of eternity. We make meaning not from endlessness, but from the choice to see beauty in what is temporary. It's easy to imagine that the universe doesn't notice such small acts. Yet if everything is connected, then every quiet kindness, every moment of wonder must ripple outward, however faintly. Perhaps that's how meaning survives the collision of worlds, not through grand monuments or theories, but through the simple continuity of compassion. When you think about it, the greatest scientific truths and the gentlest human emotions are not opposites. They are mirrors of the same realization, that everything is linked. Gravity pulls planets together, and love pulls hearts toward one another. Both are forces of attraction that shape reality. Both remind us that isolation is an illusion. In the end, perhaps the universe doesn't need to be infinite to be vast or eternal to be meaningful. Maybe it only needs to exist long enough for someone to notice it, to look at it with wonder, to breathe it in, to say this is enough. So pause for a moment. Listen to the quiet around you. The air you inhale is older than history. The warmth on your skin has crossed light years. Everything that touches you has been something else before. You're not separate from the universe. You're one of its ways of feeling alive. And that, more than anything, is why this fragile world matters. Because in all the possible realities that might exist, there is only one where your consciousness meets this breath, where your eyes trace the light of this particular dawn. Among infinite skies, this heartbeat exists only once, and it's beautiful precisely because it will not last forever. And so, after all the wondering, after the shifting of stars and the soft rewriting of everything familiar, the story finds its stillness again. The universe has folded and unfolded countless times, yet here, in this quiet moment, it feels as though everything is resting, like ripples settling back into the calm of a pond. If another world brushed against ours tonight, perhaps it wouldn't come as thunder or flame. Perhaps it would arrive like a whisper, a shimmer in the air, a breath that feels just slightly warmer, a moment when you can't tell whether you're awake or still drifting in a dream. It's possible that such a merging has already happened many times before. Each time the universe changes, each time the laws rearrange themselves into new harmonies, reality doesn't vanish. It just learns a new rhythm. Like music shifting key, it continues, the melody softer, deeper, yet still recognizably its own. Maybe that's what we're feeling now, not the end of a story, but the quiet blending of chapters, the moment when two lines of time meet and overlap, their words blurring into one another until only the emotion remains. In this silence, you can almost sense the edges of all those other worlds we've spoken of, their faint presence brushing against ours, their light merging with ours so gently that it feels like the warmth of memory rather than something new. The air holds it, the stars carry it, the night in its deep patience listens to it all. If you close your eyes, imagine the surface of a still lake at dusk. A single drop of rain falls, just one, and the circles it makes drift outward, overlapping with the ones before it, blending until there's no boundary between them. That is how universes meet. Not with violence, but with continuity. Every ripple carries a trace of what came before. We began this journey imagining collisions, cataclysms and cosmic upheaval. But maybe the truth is gentler. Maybe the universe doesn't crash into itself. Maybe it remembers how to meet softly, the way waves merge when they reach the shore. Creation, after all, doesn't always need fire. Sometimes it begins in the hush that follows understanding. If the cosmos could speak, perhaps it would say, "This is how I grow," by touching, by blending, by listening. And maybe that is how we grow too, not through conquest or certainty, but through quiet connection, through the slow merging of stories, lives and worlds. You can see it even here, in the simplest things, in the way morning light meets shadow and creates dawn, in the way the ocean meets the air and creates clouds, in the way two hands meet and create warmth. Every meeting, however small, is a kind of merge, a rehearsal for something vast and eternal. So, if there truly are infinite realities, then maybe they're not scattered and separate. Maybe they are threads of the same tapestry, woven through one another so tightly that the differences only seem distinct from far away. From within, it's all one fabric, shifting in colour, in tone, in texture, but still whole. And maybe consciousness, the quiet awareness you feel now, is what moves along those threads, experiencing each pattern in turn. Perhaps the soul doesn't belong to one world or one body, but to the act of experiencing itself. Each lifetime, each world, is just another note in that endless song. Somewhere, another version of you might be listening to this same thought, under another sky, in a slightly different universe. The stars above that version might glow in a different order, the air might carry another scent, but the feeling, that soft pull of wonder and peace, would be the same. The melody repeats but never identically. And that is what makes existence beautiful. The repetition with variation, the eternal return of what is familiar but never exactly the same. The universe breathes in and out, creating, dissolving and recreating. You are part of that breath, the inhale and exhale of being itself. You might wonder, what happens when everything finally merges? When all ripples meet? When all differences dissolve? Would there be silence then? A final stillness with no more motion, no more time? Maybe. But maybe silence is not absence, but fulfillment. The pause after the last note of a symphony, when sound still lingers in the air though no instrument plays. That silence is where meaning lives, not in the noise of becoming, but in the quiet of being. If you listen closely now, you might notice it. The hum beneath the sound of your own breath, the subtle vibration of the world holding you. It's the same hum that has been here since the beginning, the pulse of everything that ever was and ever will be. Scientists give it names: background radiation, 0-point energy, the quantum foam. But tonight, it can simply be called what it feels like: presence. Presence doesn't need explanation, just asks to be felt. It's the awareness that nothing is separate, that every atom of your body has been part of something else, a star, a stone, a storm, and will be again. And when that thought settles, there's a deep peace that follows, a recognition that even if universes collide, even if realities fade and reform, the essence of what you are, this simple consciousness, this ability to perceive and to love, remains. It doesn't vanish, it flows. Like light passing through water, it bends, it softens, but it continues on its way, carrying traces of everything it has ever touched. So if tonight feels like an ending, let it also feel like a beginning. Let the idea of countless worlds merging not frighten you, but soothe you. Because within that merge lies belonging, the quiet truth that you are never alone, never separate from the vastness around you. You have always been part of the same unfolding story. And so, if you're still awake, know that the universe is still here, quietly overlapping, gently humming, waiting for you to drift. The ripples of all that ever was and all that will be are already passing through you, soft as breath, timeless as light. Let them carry you. Let them fold you into the great calm. Because in the end, the story isn't about collision or creation or even survival. It's about returning to the still center where everything meets, where every ripple becomes one, and where finally you can rest.